For the topic 3.2, it is entitled Continuity on an Interval. Here are known facts on the continuities of a function on interval. Continuity of polynomial, absolute value, rational, and square root functions. So first, polynomial functions are continuous everywhere. Kasi pasabutan na, if given function is a polynomial function, no questions asked, it is continuous everywhere. So maski pag unsang pangutanan diya kumbaga, kung given is polynomial, no need na ka maghunaw na, then you can directly conclude that it is continuous. Kaya it is, again, continuous everywhere man. Next, the absolute value function. The absolute value function f of x equals to absolute value of x is also continuous everywhere. So, again, kung polynomial function ang given or absolute value function ang given, continuous siya always on any interval. So, masipag unsang interval ang given, conclude ka diretso continuous. Rational function. Rational functions are continuous on their respective domains lang. Meaning, continuous lang ang rational function katong domain niya, meaning katong dili makapa-zero sa denominator. Kaya pag once, ang questions asked is, ang interval is naa didto na belong si number nga makapa-zero sa denominator, then dili siya continuous didto. Pero kung sa interval, given interval, walay makapa-zero sa iyaha didto, then continuous si rational function. So that's for the rational function. The square root function, with square root function f of x equals to square root of x is continuous on this interval only, from 0 to positive infinity. Any interval from 0 to positive infinity continuous si square root function. But aside ani, di na siya continuous. Ngano? Because ang square root function is only defined if ang x nimo is positive. So di ka pwede mag-negative diha. So mao na continuous siya sa interval nga 0 to positive infinity. So those are some facts nga magamit nato para mas madali atong pag-identify sa continuity at on an interval. So let's have an example para mas masabtan. Consider the graph of the function f of f kani daw given below. Then we are asked, using the given graph, determine if the function f is continuous on the given interval. How will we determine, using, kung given ang graph, kung continuous ba siya on a given interval? Nanaw na to, negative 1, nara si negative 1. So meaning, nadiri imong vertical line nga gina-consider na x equals to negative 1. And sa 1, nara si 1. So meaning, diri atong vertical line na x equals to 1. Then, from this one, so nara atong graph dire. Kanilang nga graph, kanilang na ay red. Kanilang nga graph. Considering this part of the graph lang, can you draw this graph without lifting your writing material? Since you can observe na I can draw, di can dire, from here to here, I did not lift my writing material, then we can conclude that this function is continuous at on the interval negative 1 to 1. So, ana pag-identify kung given ang graph. Another example, what about at on the interval negative infinity to positive up to 0? So, negative infinity is kaning naa sa left, dali nga part. Tapos, ang 0 is nara. Morning vertical line nga atong i-consider x equals to 0. Meaning, sa left ni 0. Okay. So, question na po, can you draw the part sa left sa 0? So, kaning nga part, kaning gi-red na ko. Okay. So, can you draw this one without lifting your writing material? And since I have done that one, na I redraw the graph without lifting my writing material, then you can conclude that f is continuous at continuous on the interval negative infinity to 0. So na siya. Hopefully na kuha ang concept na sa continuity on an interval. Another one, x 0 to positive infinity. So this is your 0, kaninga vertical line, and positive infinity is sa right siya, meaning sa right ni 0. So from here, mamaning si part sa graph nga right ni 0. So can you redraw this one? Obviously, I have redrawn the graph without lifting my writing material, then we can say that this function is continuous on the interval 0 to positive infinity. So that's what continuity on an interval means sa calculus. So hopefully, nakuha ang concept sa continuity. Let's consider another example. Kani. This is another graph similar sa last graph, but be reminded nga kanang nara nga part is unshaded. So bantayanan lang na. Yan determine if the function is continuous from -1 to 1. So from -1, again there is a -1, x equals to -1 to kani x equals to 1. So kani nga part sa imuhang graph. Question, can you redraw that one without lifting your writing material? From here to here, I have to stop because naa siya hole before I can continue to the other side. So since I have lifted my writing material, then this function is not continuous on the interval -1 to 1. So what about from 0.5 to 2? 0.5 is 1/2. So 0, nara si 0, nara si 1. Si 1/2 is somewhere here. 0.5 na diya. So meaning we can have an imaginary vertical line x equals to 0.5 to 2. So nara si 2. X equals to 2. So from here, starting here, padulong kay 2, kaninga part. So can you redraw that part of the graph without lifting your writing material? And I bet you will answer yes, because you can redraw that one without lifting your writing material since wala may hole in between. So therefore, we can conclude that this function is continuous on the interval on the interval 0.5 to 2, inclusive. Again, inclusive because ano siya ang symbol. Kasabot sa inclusive, apil si 0.5, apil po si 2. Kani exclusive man eh. Exclusive, walay labot si -1. Kaning parenthesis, dili ni siya inclusive. -1 to 1, exclusive ni siya because walay labot si -1 and +1. Unlike ani, inclusive ni because apil si 0.5 and 2. Really nakuha ang difference sa duha. So that's sa example of a graph na dili siya continuous sa some part pero continuous siya to the other interval pod. So sa isa ka graph posibly continuous siya sa some interval na po'y dili siya continuous or continuous sa from given an interval pero sa other interval posibly dili siya continuous, posibly pod continuous. Ngana. So I hope na kuha na ang continuity. I hope kabalo na mo determine kung continuous ang isa ka function or not given a graph. So let's continue. Okay. A function f is said to be continuous everywhere if f is continuous at every real number. So, pag musulti gani siya continuous at every real number, then it is continuous everywhere, kumbaga. And in this case, we can say that f is continuous on R. Kani nga symbol sa R is real number na siya. Next. So we have here, ikaduha. F is said to be continuous on an open interval. Another pagbasa ni is open interval. Open siya kung parenthesis. Open interval from A to B. Meaning exclusive siya A to B. Walay labot si A, walay B. Walay labot si B. If continue siya on an open interval from A to B if F is continuous at every point X on this one. So meaning matawag na to continuous siya sa kaninga interval once continuous siya at every point na naa sa sulod ani. Similar sa kanipod. Continuous siya ani nga interval, ang naka-difference lang ani is close interval siya from A to open interval siya kay B. Kasi pasabot ani. Included ang si A pero si B walay labot. Pero in between nila, apil tanan. So say pasabot ana, continue siya on this interval pag continue siya in between and from the right of A. Meaning apil pud si A. So included si A and aside kay A, between pud nila A to B. So sa diri pod, pag ingani ang symbol, continue siya on between A to B and from the left of B. When we say from the left, included si B. Okay, again, ang symbol na to, bracket man, di man siya parenthesis. And then kung kani nga symbol, on an interval, close interval A to B, so continue siya sa kani and on sa kanipod. Kasi pasabot ani, between, included ang between from A to B and sa A pod, pati pod si B. Kana nga mga points. Kay consider maning ana. Kaning apil si A, apil si B, and apil pod ang between nila. While kaning from A to positive infinity, continue siya on all X nga naa sa right or greater than A. Kung continue siya sa tanang naa sa right ni A, including pud kang A. Kay again, naman ning symbol. So kung kanipod negative infinity to B, continue siya on all X na less than B. Okay? From negative infinity to B man eh. While kanidere, negative infinity to B pero bracket. So continue siya on this interval including B. So ang bottom line lang ana is dapat familiar lang mo ani nga mga symbol diri. Ang nag-differ lang man ana kung kana pasabot walay labot tong given A and B. Pero kung kana apil si A, apil pod si B. And depende na pod na kung A dere si B. So kung ingani apil si A, walay labot si B. Pero apil tong in between nila. Always. Always apil ang between nila. Then, kung diri pod, diri si A, si B, walay labot si A, apil si B, apil po tong between nila. So, ingana lang ang concept or ang point ani nga discussion. So, let's continue. So, this example 3 is an application sa continuity on an interval. Problems involving continuity on interval is parehaan eh. Let us say you are asked to determine the largest interval over which the function f of x equals, gamitan na ito kuan para mas kuan. Again, determine the largest interval over which the function f of x equals square root of x plus 2 is continuous. So, what is the largest interval na continuous daw nga function? So, to solve that one, take note that the given function is naka-square root. I think na-discuss na ko ni sa Untitled po ninyo na pag once ang function naka-square root, ang x must always be greater than or equal to kung unsa tong naa sa radical sign ang pasabot nako. Kung unsa tong nasa radical sign, meaning x plus 2 must be greater than or equal to 0. Meaning, ang radicand must be greater than 0. And then, ang radicand na to is x plus 2 man. So, we just simply solve this one. Then, unsang value na sa value of x na dapat greater than 0 siya. So, we can transfer this one to the other side, di ba? X is greater than or equal to negative 2. So, kani ang symbol na karon. But we are asked ang interval. So, recall tong sa Untitled, how will you transform this one as an interval? Di ba katong sa Untitled, basta greater than, kung saan ganito pagkuan, greater than, there is infinity. Tapos there is negative 2. Tapos na may linya, so greater than meaning sa right ni negative 2. So sa right ni negative 2, pag ingani ang symbol, diri ka magbutang og infinity. Tapos negative 2 diri. So therefore ang answer, ang gipangita nga largest interval nga continuous siya is from negative 2 to positive infinity. Meaning, from this any point on this interval, continuous ang imong function. But kung wala diri nga interval, dili na siya continuous. So, ingana ang pagpangitag largest interval kung given tag square root nga function. All you have to do is, again, ang radicand ninyo is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, because for a square root function, para ma-define siya, dapat greater than or equal to 0 man. Then, determine the critical value, then, buhaton na nimo og interval. So, next, about this one. Same question, but different ang given. Ang given this time is h of x equals to x over x squared minus 1. So, we are asked to determine the largest interval gyapon over which this one is continuous. So, recall again sa Untitled that pag once rational, ang bantayan na nato, ang denominator which is x squared minus 1 must not be equal to 0. So, what values will make this 0? So, unsa nga mga value ang makapa-0 ana, meaning kung ato nang ibalin sa pikas, we have x squared must not be equal to 1. Next, we have here x must not be equal to positive or negative 1. So nanatay, answer. Dili dapat positive or negative 1 because si positive or negative 1 will make the denominator 0. Ang question na lang, how will you present this one in an interval form? So to present this one in an interval form, you start with negative infinity to positive to negative 1. So, yun, positive infinity to positive 1. Ay, kulang pa. Sorry, balikan na to ha. Again, kulang na eh. Sa baba na lang. Again, Kung sa number line maguna, kung gamitan na itong number line, except kay negative 1 o 1. Walay labot ni, the rest, apil na. So, anak kung number line, no? So, kung buhatan na to, we start with this part. How will you make that into an interval form, di ba? From negative infinity to negative 1. Yun, kanina po sa tunga. Negative 1 to positive 1. Then lastly, kanina pong nasa right. Yun, positive 1 to infinity. So again, ang point lang man is walay labot si positive 1 or negative 1. So this is the interval na walay labot si positive 1 and negative 1. So on this given interval, h of x is continuous. But kung 1 ang x nimo o negative 1, dili siya continuous. Kaya mo 0 man si denominator. So in ana pag rational po siya. So ganina ang gihatag na tong example is radical, this one is kung rational. So ang medyo kailangan lang din nato review ani is kung saan pag-convert sa equation to interval form. So yun, I hope na kuha ang process. Next, example 5. What about kung naka piecewise function po siya? How will we determine if if the given piecewise function is continuous on a given interval? So kani, is G continuous on 0 to 1? Ang kung ano nimo anak karon, i-check nimo asa nga interval ni. Kung kaning 0 to 1, meaning x kani, parenthesis man is greater than 0, kani included man but less than or equal to 1. So dapat familiar na mo unsaon pag-transform ani, kanina baliktad man, di ba? Karon kanina given kag x is greater than or equal to 1, i-convert na to interval. Nahimo siya 1 to from 1 to positive infinity. Kani, given na po kag interval, kailangan na po nimo i-convert to ngani nga pagkasulat. Kay mao may given dere. Mao nang pangutaon nimo karon. Asa na ang interval, which is klaro nga kani. So kung tanaw nato ni nga interval, ang iyang function is kani. So based on this interval, g of x is equals to 3. Ang question na karon is g of x continuous? And since na-discuss na nato nga polynomial function is continuous, this one is considered is a polynomial function. Constant function man under gyapon siya sa polynomial function. So no need na naman tayo, nabalo naman tayo nga pag once polynomial continuous everywhere. So therefore, g of x, you can now conclude, therefore, g of x is continuous on this interval. So nga na ang kwan. Again, ang una gibuhat, gitransform na to ni para makuha ni, tapos pangita ni mo, then check kung continuous siya dito. Okay, next. What about 4 to infinity? Kung saan na to ni pag-transform to katong x. So paging ani, actually, x din na always na sa tunga. Tapos ang nadering side, si 4. Ang nadering side, infinity man dapat, no? So wala na tayo butang diha. Ana na lang na. Pero, ang point is, ang atong naandan, iuna man nato si x. So, baliktad nato ni. X iuna, baliktaron po nato si inequality sign. And 4. So x is greater than 4. So meaning kanidi ay nga pagka-symbol nga interval between 4 to negative to positive infinity is kanida ni pagkasulat. So pangitaon na po na nimo dire, which is naara. So on this interval, ang g of x nimo is equivalent to x minus 3, which is another polynomial function. So therefore, g of x is continuous on this interval. Kaya again, polynomial function is continuous everywhere man. So nga na pag-determine kung continuous siya on a given interval or not. Okay? That's all for our topic